I stared at the receding Q train and appreciated how its rear lights were reflected perfectly in the gutter of black sludge comprised of rat feces, litter, and storm runoff in between the tracks. I was leaning against a wooden metal bench. Beside me was an Asian guy wearing a red coat and holding a utility cart with a thin box strapped to it. I peered over at the front of the cart to see what kind of strap he had used. It was a kind of cinching belt, and as I did so, I felt a strange desire to smell the man. And at once the vision of my lotion-slathered cock from last night struck me, and a throat of shame reduced me to, in vain, wondering if everyone did not also have a lotion-slathered cock. And now on the 7 train, eating an apple, a pretty girl with tattoos on her fingers gets on at Grand Central, so I whip out my notebook and try to make the most of my limited time with this delicate fleur. Somehow we happen to be wearing the same shoes, a fact that I wonder whether she notices. What will I do when she gets off the train? For she is bound to get off before me. The same rule applies about pretty girls and subway stops in Queens as in Brooklyn, that the pretty girls get off in the fashionable neighborhoods, which are usually closer to Manhattan. She is not making any interesting motions except a gentle swilling of her right foot at the ankle. She checks something on her phone occasionally. She seems to be somewhat pleased with herself. Her eyes are squinting and pinched upward at the corner in pleasure. She stares out the window at the loveliest of scenes with what is presumably meant to be poised elegance, but her nervously swilling ankle betrays some anxiety that I am not yet aware of. But oh, a clue. When she checks her phone, she stops swilling her ankle. But when she puts her phone down, her ankle begins swilling again. This leads me to conclude that she is currently engaged in the kind of conversation over text that may or may not result in something consequential as far as matters of the heart. But why do I say that she is pretty? In fact, I would say that she is very pretty. In her case, it is because of her way of carrying herself. While I was sitting on the stoop of 6th Avenue, many girls passed, many of whom had a particular regal air about them that suggested to me that they were accustomed to being treated as though they were valuable commodities, to be bought at a high price. This attitude I find repulsive. But this girl, she came on the train without any designs. I see her now. I see now as she allows her eyelids to remain closed for longer stretches between blinks, displaying their pink vein-rimmed ornaments, that she is tired. And this is the cause of her giddiness, which I attributed to self-adoration. As a matter of fact, I am obliged to write that I was dead wrong about how long she'd be riding the train. There are only 4 more stops left on the train, and she is still here. What a wonderful, odd creature. I suspect that she will be disembarking shortly, however, but not before leaving me with an act of charity for my loneliness. When I closed my eyes to try and come up with the proper way to describe her pink-tinged eyelids, I still don't think I've done an adequate job. I felt our minds coming into union, sharing a brief moment of together rest. I want to die as soon as possible because I'm not happy. Furthermore, even if I was happy, I would still want to die because life isn't real. I'm on the 4 train coming back from my time in the Bronx. It was horribly exhausting to be up there, and I don't think it was really that great a use of my time. That being said, however, there were a number of images that stood out to me. I was riding the BX9 bus, and we were stalled at a red light under the elevated railway of the 1 train. I was staring out the dirt-streaked window of the bus, and I was too tired to look at anything complicated, so I was staring at the ground, which was cracked. There was a car parked in the opposite direction of the bus, so it was facing me, and its headlights were on. They shone upon the cracks in the pavement, bathing the small fissures in amber light and shadow. There was water dripping from the elevated railway onto the cracks in the pavement. It was all very pleasant to watch, and I wanted to record it, either with my phone or in my notebook, but I was too exhausted and dizzy, and this frustration and impotence heightened the beauty of the image. Another image. I was walking down Fordham Road toward the 4 train when I decided to take a left down a side street so I could pee. After I was done, I continued down that side street to the next street parallel with Fordham so I could turn right and continue on toward the 4 train. I was looking around at all of the apartment buildings and the blinding storefronts of the delis. It overwhelmed me greatly. I thought back to what I had been writing earlier about wanting to die. I thought that the lighted windows of these apartment buildings were a big part of the reason. I thought about the chaotic monstrosity of society. I thought of all the resources it takes to keep us alive. I thought about the difference between Midtown Manhattan and Fordham Road here in the Bronx, and I felt that it was utterly disgraceful for such a difference to exist. But I don't have enough energy to be outraged anymore. It just makes me very, very sad. As I walked on, I came up to the Grand Concourse, where there was a station for the B and D trains. But I didn't want those trains, so I decided to keep moving. There were a number of people crowding around the entrance to the subway. A man with a grill cooking up skewers of meat and hot dogs. A man holding a recently purchased skewer of meat and talking on the phone. 2 men who were high and were stumbling around a bit, preparing to climb the stairs down to the subway. One of them was talking on the phone to a woman, explaining what he was going to do before he could meet up with her. The other was shoving something into his nostril. There was another man standing quite in the middle of the sidewalk, evidently very high on heroin or something like it. His eyes were half closed, and he was crouching slowly into a squat, lifting himself back into a standing position and then dozing off, allowing himself to drift back into a squat. His pants were hanging down below his knees, but he had others on beneath these. After a few moments, he seemed to realize what he was doing, and he pulled his pants on, and hobbled off into the alcove of a storefront. There was a big puddle between the curb and the street, right where it is most convenient to walk, and this murky, filthy puddle was filled with all sorts of rubbish. A man came up to it, stuttered a little, hopped awkwardly over it, causing a brief few droplets to splash all around his foot, and went on his way, shaking his head at something he wouldn't have been able to describe, but which is the same dejected resignation with which I declare that all joy is dead to me, and I now long for naught but sweet, putrescent death.